Thank you for joining us. This is Will with Perpetual Assets. Very excited to have our main man back on the line, Dr. Jim Willie. He is the editor of the Hat Trick Letter, which is found on the website goldenjackass.com. Jim, welcome. How are you, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing very strange. Good to see you, good to hear you, and good to be on. We're in now some very dangerous times, and it's getting to the point now where even the semi-brain dead in the U.S. population are starting to realize, oh my gosh, this is getting very weird.
That's a great point, and I'll segue on that if I can. Today is, pardon me, Friday, November the 10th. Jim and I spoke on Monday of this week, just 5 days ago, just chit-chatted over the line about some of these topics, about specifically the Saudi arrests. And boy, we've been really itching to get this interview on the air recorded because how fast this thing has been developing even since Monday. Love how you said that the brain dead, thinkless zombies are starting to question and wake up. And shit, I might as well just bring it right out of the. Pardon me, put the kids away for this show. I think we might have a few bad words that slip. The Vegas event. Our friend Sean over at SGT Report has covered this really well in a couple videos he's put together this week. I'll link them in our broadcast. He's gone into pretty good detail about these Saudi arrests. One of them he called the Purge, or something about the Purge. And boy, if it doesn't feel like this is the draining of the swamp or some relevant, piece of it regarding people waking up. If we compare this Vegas event, this Vegas shooting, to let's say Sandy Hook, however many years ago that was. If you were awake when Sandy Hook happened, or even just questioned enough when it happened, or soon after it happened, you were like the deepest, darkest conspiracy people alive. In fact, I lost a friend, an old friend I used to work with because we got into such a massive just battle about Sandy Hook on Facebook of all places. Her vehemently in support of it actually occurring and me saying that it was a complete hoax. Well, now this Vegas thing has happened, and literally days after the event, you've got large sections of not only the alt media, but even social media questioning this thing. It's so far-fetched. We're talking about a casino that has, thousands? Tens of thousands? I don't know how many cameras they have, but there's no footage. And then enter the Saudi stuff, and Sean covered how the Saudis, one of the prince, whatever, they own the top 5 floors, or they own 5 floors in the Mandalay Bay. I think it was the top 5. Or their company does or something. So it's all piecing together here. Obviously, Saudi's been intimately tied to terror activity all over the world in the last, couple decades. Boy, it would be, we were talking just before the call, and wouldn't the 9/11 stain, I'm going to call it a stain on humanity because that's what it is. It's still a massive lie. And wouldn't boy, letting the cat out of the bag on that. I mean, they just arrested his brother, right? They arrested Osama bin Laden's brother. Shit's getting real, Jim.
Yeah. Shit. You cracked me up a couple weeks ago when you said shit is getting real. This is the climax of the petrodollar dying. The sunset, the collapse, the breakdown, the dismantling. Call it what you wish. This is the end of the petrodollar as we know it. Let me just make very brief comments about Sandy Hook. I was suspicious very quickly when I heard that almost immediately the Connecticut legislature passed a law saying that no information about the event could be made public or put into the press. What? Excuse me? I mean, give me a break. That's just what shade of ludicrous is that? Okay, next. Clients, 2 or 3 clients in Connecticut said, Jim, you need to know this, that the school had been closed for close to 2 years. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, does anybody care about what people are saying who have Sandy Hook down the road? The answer is, on the national level, no. Mm. They're not interested in that. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about Sandy Hook, a contrived event, one of several.
For me, if I can interject quickly, for me it was the Robbie Parker. I mean, this was the nail in the coffin for me. Google it, Robbie, R-O-B-B-I-E, Parker. He was one of the parents, supposed parents, of a slain little girl. And there's a video that exists of someone recording. This was a public broadcast, addressing the nation, if you will, after this event. And this guy, Robbie Parker, the supposed father of one of these kids, was going to speak. And he didn't know that the news video camera was already recording before he had approached the podium and approached the microphone. So the video camera's rolling, and he is, before he's approached the podium, he's laughing, he's giggling, he's like, it's unbelievable. And then all of a sudden, they do, you see a sort of seconds, countdown, whatever. He does this little, what an actor might do, getting into basically taking himself to a place where he can start crying.
Yeah, putting himself into character.
Putting himself into character, and then it starts rolling, and he's crying. He's like, I'm one of the fathers of. I mean, that was unreal. Sorry.
Well, that's not the only suspicious person in that. There's a woman who was a mother at Sandy Hook, but she was also the lawyer of the fire red-haired guy in Aurora, Colorado, and she was also a witness at Orlando, where they got caught moving bodies in, not moving bodies out. Anyway, I just read something recently about Vegas, that there are no bullet holes in the windows or the tents. And there are numerous reports of people going to the hospital to visit their friend, only to find out that they were really never shot and had fake blood on their body. And you just go on and on and on. All right, enough of all that. What possibly happened? I don't know, but there are now scattered reports that Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, was in the Mandalay Bay Hotel and in the suites, apparently, owned by Prince Al-Walid. And they're not buddies. Mm-hmm. So there might have been an assassination attempt. We need time to see this get sorted out. I don't know. But in the following days, Prince Al-Walid had his wealth confiscated and was arrested. And we're told that there's a corruption crackdown in Saudi Arabia. Well, could the corruption have to do with assassination attempts, that kind of corruption? Or are we talking about just financial fraud and, secretive bank accounts and, child trafficking and heroin trafficking? My gosh, this is now starting to expose the Saudi-Bush heroin connection that funds ISIS. Okay, that's where I want this thing to start opening up. But, back to my major point, the fall of the House of Saud, I think, has begun. We now have a strong man who captured the Crown Prince position. I'm talking about Mohammed bin Salman, MBS. That's what he's called a lot, MBS in the press. Well, there was formerly a Mohammed bin Zayed, who was the Crown Prince and who was the favorite for the Langley Group.
Nayef, you said, right? With an N?
With an Nayef, yeah, with an N. Ending with an F as in Frank. Nayef. Mm-hmm. Okay, so everybody's a Mohammed there. In my opinion, they're all just a bunch of freaking corrupt clowns who never washed themselves down there. we've got a very dicey situation where MBS, the Crown Prince, is arresting, capturing, torturing, confiscating, and perhaps killing his rivals. And it's very difficult to know all the players without a program, like for a Greek tragedy, a play. We need a program. And some of the Zero Hedge articles actually provide a decent program for who the players are. The National Guard head, the head of the National Guard for the Saudis, he's dead. He was on a helicopter that got shot down. There were 10 kills on that helicopter. Wow. One was bin Laden's brother, and one was former King Abdullah's 2 boys. Okay? So, if I were MBS, I might want to get rid of the sons of the previous king. I might want to get rid of other rivals to the throne. These guys are half-brothers. They don't have... Their family trees are ridiculous looking because you need page after page on the side. They don't go vertical. They got, 36 brothers. Mm-hmm. They're half-brothers. Because the kings and the princes can't keep it in their pants. They've got, 5 or 7 gals that they keep busy, and they tend to get pregnant. Because if I were a prince, and I was told, hey, where's your protection, honey? I would say, let me slap your face, get back down there, and just take it. That's how the princes act.
I think that's...
They end up having a lot of half-brothers.
I think that's like culture for their society, actually.
Yeah, it's pretty weird stuff. There was a potential heir to the throne, the head of the intelligence agency named Mansour Mukrin. The whole Mukrin family had claims to the throne. Well, the main guy is now dead. He was on a helicopter. I'm wondering if Langley took out a helicopter because they just saw way too many juicy targets there. If eliminated, would firm up Mohammed bin Salman's position as crown prince. I got to mention something about Daddy. I remember about 8 years ago, it was one king before Abdullah, and honestly, I'm struggling to remember his name. It might have been Fahd. Might have been one of the Fahds. But anyway, the main patriarch died, and Abdullah became king. I think Fahd died, and the next brother, that's how they work it. The next brother took the crown, and it was Abdullah. And there was a lot of worry in the United States that Abdullah is really not pro-United States. Just way too many negative comments made in public in the last several years, and he makes Washington nervous. But he became king, and at issue was the Prince Sultan Air Base, and they had a rule in Saudi that the Americans could not defile their grounds with military on their soil. But Abdul just held his breath, farted, and said, okay. And he agreed. And Prince Sultan Air Base became very important in attacking Iraq. And the Saudis were very bent out of shape. We were using their soil as an air base, attacking fellow Arabs, fellow Sunni Arabs. Mm. Okay. But then Abdullah died, and the old line is, you're left with the runts of the litter among the brothers. Mm. And it was Salman. So Salman's king, but it quickly became determined that he was senile. And the voice has been saying many times, don't really believe that Salman went to the Kremlin to sign anything, because he usually doesn't know where he is. He usually doesn't know who he's talking to, and he surely cannot hold a pen to sign anything. So they got a double as King Salman going around to various heads of states to sign agreements, like in Russia, like in the Gulf Arab monarchy nations, and like in China.
Do these heads of states know this?
I think they absolutely do, and without a doubt are told exactly what they're going to do before they even arrive.
Wow.
They're going to sign this. They're going to have a meeting with these three parties. They're going to have a meeting with these other corporate and banker or pipeline executives. The following things will be agreed upon, and everything will be orchestrated. It'll be all cuckoo. Okay, so now we're hearing that King Salman is in a position very soon to abdicate the throne to his son, who wrestled it from his other brother. Oh my gosh. I'm wondering whether he's going to do something to the Zayef clan, who used to be the Crown Prince clan and no longer are. Are they going to have their wealth confiscated? Okay, when you arrest another prince, when you arrest another half-brother, which is much the same thing, when you arrest other officials who are strong men for those families, you produce tremendous resentment. You create incentive for vengeance.
Revolution.
Yeah, I'm leading to that. So, you know, in the Arab world, they make vengeance kind of a religious rite.
Mm-hmm.
I mean R-I-T-E, not with a G-H. It's not a privilege and something that you're entitled to. It's something you do as a celebration of your religion. Mm-hmm. A rite, R-I-T-E. All right, I think we got now MBS just seeding all kinds of seeds, sowing a lot of seeds. And they're going to come back. He's buying time. One of the common themes that I'm hearing in various reports and analyses and articles is MBS has bought some time. It looks like he's confiscated $500 to $800 billion from these rivals and half-brothers and other officials. And that will take care of some of the war costs in Yemen. That'll take care of some of the government costs. And that will prevent the Chinese from being all that critically necessary for funding agents. But in doing so, he's really only bought 2 or 3 or 4 months before something grows and happens as part of vengeance. I think what MBS has done is guaranteed his own assassination. That's what I think, Will. Do you think that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, how does the U.S. play into this, right? So MBS is just one of Langley's stooges?
This is where it gets complicated and a little bit difficult both to comprehend and explain, but I'll try, and I will admit that I'm still working on comprehending all this. Mm-hmm. Bear in mind that the Bush-Clinton narcotics group is involved in Saudi Arabia. And the profits from the Saudi narco business are directed toward ISIS funding. So you could say that the Saudis for 10 years or more have been deeply tied in with the narco wing of the U.S. government. And I think that is in opposition to the Trump Pentagon wing. Think of it as the Pentagon white hats who want a clean house, but they still want to continue the war because it's good for business. Okay, so you've got the White Hat Pentagon group that opposes the Bush fascist neocon narco group, but this White Hat Pentagon wants to continue wars. Okay, this is kind of messy. You can't say, well, there's a clean line between that. Not really, because the narco money is funding the Ukraine war too. And we do have some Pentagon regulars in Ukraine. So we've got a little bit of both, the narco and the Pentagon soldier types in Ukraine. I don't think we have standard Pentagon types in Saudi. We've only got the narco element of the U.S. military, Langley side. And I got to harken back to something Cato told me 3 years ago. I remember it was 3 years ago because I remember the office that I was sitting in when I talked about it a lot with friends. Cato said to me, Jim, in the next year, this was 2014, he said it, in the next year, you're going to see it revealed that there are two elements of the U.S. military. One is Pentagon funded by the government, taxpayer, if you will, but it's really just more like deficit finance, not taxpayer. Taxpayer doesn't finance much of anything. All right, so the one side is Pentagon funded by the U.S. government and the deficit spending. But the other side is the Langley military and the mercenaries that are funded by narcotics and the Bush-Clinton gang. Anyone who thinks Bush and Clinton come from opposite political parties, like my brother, you're a political moron.
There's a great...
They're joined by heroin.
There's a G. Edward Griffin did a video or whatever called The Collectivist Conspiracy. The Collectivist Conspiracy, and it's about an hour, if I remember correctly, and he goes through the creation of the left and right wing as a means to really just divert us and for the power elite to trick us and continue doing whatever the hell they want, regardless of red or blue, whoever's color is in office at the time. What, Jim? If I can continue, you said, okay, so this would make sense, right? This Pentagon side versus this Langley side, as it pertains to Vegas and as it pertains to Saudi. Do you remember? Or did you right after Vegas? I mean, I think it was a day or two. Trump had a meeting with his military brass top advisors and their wives. It was a dinner, I think, a ball or dinner or something. But I don't think it was planned. I think this was maybe it was already planned. Anyway, at this ball or dinner, he says to all of these top military advisors, this is the calm before the storm. And that was literally, days before, right after Vegas, and right before all this stuff has started occurring.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that, just regard Trump as a creature whose strings are connected to both the Pentagon and Wall Street. Mm-hmm. That's how I look at it.
But not Langley, yeah.
Not Langley, no.
You don't see him as this good guy, this Ron Paul, if you will, who's going to come in and stop the wars and stop the spending and all this. But
well,
maybe...
he campaigned on stopping the wars, but the first act and deed he did was to hire Goldman Sachs folks to run the finance and announce a Pentagon budget increase.
Yeah, true that. And then he also signed off or allowed an airstrike. It wasn't his first or second day in office in Yemen.
In Syria.
Syria, thank you. Yeah, I killed a little girl, and yeah, that's out there too.
Well, I'm disappointed that that Trump has both the dirty finance Wall Street at one controlling arm and the endless war advocates. I much prefer giving it a semi-sweet title, endless war advocates, or you could say, the white hat Pentagon types that sponsor endless war. Okay, I'd rather that than the narcos who controlled the Bushes and the Clinton and Obama.
Yeah, and they're probably the ones who are totally, completely in charge of the sex trafficking, too. I don't know if the white hats... Hey, I'm not for perpetual war. It's heinous. It's awful. I'm not saying let's pick a lesser evil here, but I agree with you. If we can start by picking one part of the scab at a time, let's start with these Langley bastards.
Well, they're the most deeply entrenched and independently financed.
Mm-hmm.
For those listeners who are not familiar, we're dealing with Afghanistan, which produces approximately 1,300 tons of heroin a year.
What did it produce prior to 9/11, Jim? Do you have that statistic?
I think 100 tons.
No, it's 13 times that?
13 times that, but we're trying to get more congressional funding because it's going in the wrong direction. How do you like that logic?
Unfriggin' believable.
When it got up to 500 tons a year, we increased the budget.
I mean, it makes me sick. It actually really...
The budget is for creating factories, chemical factories, and
process.
buying fleets of trucks. Yeah, okay. Anyway, we're dealing with at least $800 billion of annual revenue coming out of Afghanistan for heroin. And how does it affect Joe Sixpack on the street? Well, his daughter might have an addiction to OxyContin or an opioid painkiller, and she might be dead.
The statistics are off. They're horrid. And now it's getting close to home with a lot of us. I mean, my wife's cousin, 22-year-old kid, he's gone. Heroin,
Oh, no.
And it was it was some synthetic crap that he didn't, whatever. It's these statistics did not exist 15 years ago in the scope that they do today, and it's because of these bastards. We went over there to democratize the friggin' country too, didn't we? Sorry, Jim, your niece.
Well, I've got a niece who had an overdose of methadone, which you might say is, just a half step away from a heroin overdose, and she's a mess. I mean, she's been a mess all her life, but that's a different story related to my brother's divorce. Anyway, I don't want to get into family matters like that, but just take into account the state of Ohio. Okay. Ohio in 2016 had an amazing 850 million prescriptions for painkiller opioids. In 1 year, with a population of 10 million. That's an average per person in Ohio of 85 pills. I said prescriptions. I'm not sure. I think
doses.
It would be
unit
doses. Yeah.
Units, but still, that's how many per frigging person?
85 per.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had a back injury this summer and went through all of that and pretty gnarly surgery, and the institutions. I mean, I don't fault these. I'm kind of a hippie healer most of the time, but I had an injury that was so bad that I had to go into surgery, right? And they saved my life. They saved my ass. They saved me. So I love them for that. Well, when Western medicine saves your life or someone you love, it's or something close enough to your life. It's
you don't mind all the liver damage as long as it saved your life for a temporary fix. I understand.
No, but man, they to say that they push that stuff on you is an understatement. Even when you're post-op, when you're not in pain anymore, or at least not severe, you're already thinking about weaning or withdrawing, and they're still pushing the shit on you, like in bottles of 100. I'm serious. I'm dead serious.
Oh, I know. There's actually a movement in some states now to limit the prescriptions.
Yeah.
Of opioid painkillers.
Dude, they gave them away so rapidly. I mean, I still have hundreds and hundreds of the damn thing. My wife got rid of them or took. I I was so physically dependent on them, not addicted, not where I wanted to get high or I wanted more, right? But I was on so much of it for an extended period of time because of the level of pain that I was in. Dude, getting off of these damn things, oh my God, it was weeks of hell. I mean, weeks, like of absolute
you're
hell.
basically kicking a heroin addiction,
Yeah.
because this is the heroin root within the chemical formula.
Yes.
Anyway, hey, I'm sorry to cut this, but let's try to get back to the Saudis.
Please. Yeah, please.
We've got Trump advocating the Aramco listing in New York. This is just crazy and illogical, because it was several months ago the Congress passed a law that said, due to the Saudi responsibility for 9/11, it's open season to seize and have lawsuits and awards against the Saudi assets frozen in the U.S. banking system.
And Trump comes out and suggests or advocates that the Aramco stock listing be issued in New York.
Right, and London. And I'm wondering if they might actually pull it off in return for some favors done, like killing the 10 on the helicopter.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
I don't know, Will, but these are tough questions.
Yeah, this seemingly is a lot deeper, than just good guy Trump fixing everything.
The voice said to me 3 months ago that Aramco IPO deal will never happen. And I was thinking, well, not just because of the stench of the lawsuits and the phony blame given to the Saudis when they had very little, if anything, to do. There's such weird irony here. Prince Bandar, a Saudi prince, was hired to produce the 10 young airline pilots to serve as patsies for the 9/11 official story. And for conducting this charade of phony blame for the patsies, that's qualifying as Saudi culpability in 9/11. Are you kidding me? How about Bush's older brother, who had the electrical contract for placing the explosives at 3 a.m. every single night for several months in the World Trade Center buildings?
Yeah, good point. As well as dancing Israelis, as well as lots of other Israeli ties. Yeah. But I know you don't like to talk about that little place.
No, I don't care about that. But so anyway, the other big issue regarding the Aramco sale of stock, investment stakes, is it's not worth $2 trillion. It is if you're looking maybe 40 years ago before they pumped oil. But, last I checked, call me silly, call me old-fashioned. Last I checked, if you're the world's leading oil producer for 40 consecutive years, you have a good deal of depletion. And they claimed that they had new discoveries. Well, they did, but they're small. So I'm thinking they got maybe 20 to 30% of what they claim for oil reserves, and Aramco is worth 20 to 30% of what they claim in dollar amount. And I'm not alone in thinking that, because there are a lot of Wall Street and London-based energy analysts who do a comparative valuation analysis, comparing with Exxon, comparing with Royal Dutch Shell, comparing with Rosneft of Russia, comparing with many others, and they come up with a conclusion based on ratios and all kinds of different business lines that Aramco is worth about $300 billion, not $2,000 billion. Maybe $400 billion, not 2,000. Okay, so if you look at the delayed and the delaying in listing and IPO offerings and setups in contractual obligations with the brokerage firms, and all the bickering going on, like between London and Hong Kong, you conclude quickly, maybe they're arguing over the true valuation. And I don't know the answer to that. I think they're arguing over the frozen Saudi assets in the United States financial system, open season for lawsuits, with scapegoating the Saudis, and I think they're arguing over the valuation. This is ugly. This is ugly, and it's not going to be resolved quickly. And I think we're going to see delay after delay in the entire Aramco stock situation.
Well, $2 trillion to $300 billion is quite a haircut.
Yes, it's fivefold lower, fourfold lower, and those are the numbers that they're saying. This is 5 times overpriced. Mm-hmm. This is 4 times overpriced. So rather than having an embarrassment of listing and income no investors, they do a delay. Okay, this is getting very weird. It looks to me like we have the United States giving advice to Prince Mohammed, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, on how to steal a lot of money to pay for his bills to remove from the equation the Chinese. Okay?
Mm-hmm. And you think...
And it's going to cause the seeds of a civil war.
And you think the Chinese, at least their currency, plays in a more deeply connected fashion here?
Yes. Yes, I think it's very complicated. Very complicated, and the United States is fully willing to help MBS plant the seeds of civil war if he buys a little time. Just think in terms of the Rubin Doctrine. The Rubin Doctrine says, destroy tomorrow to preserve today. Mm-hmm. So they're going to remove China from the financing equation, from the Aramco investment equation, steal $800 billion of rival accounts inside Saudi Arabia, and buy some time because he can finance the Yemen war and finance some deficits.
Very complicated indeed. It's how do you think the RMB plays in? You said this will facilitate some type of RMB swap?
I said what?
How does the RMB swap play into the Saudi situation?
What do you mean by the RMB swap? You mean the contract oil for gold and yuan?
RMB gold, yeah.
Yeah, RMB gold. Well, we're just getting a blueprint of what that is to look like without the actual rollout and execution yet.
I see.
So this is not, in other words, it's still in the port awaiting the launch. And we got some announcements of ceremonies and a lot of warnings about situation coming up. And it's just replete with danger. I don't know how this is going to shape up. I think what we're going to see is relative calm and the American press saying MBS has quieted the storm. And in 2 months, we're going to see assassination attempts. Mm-hmm. In 2 months, we're going to see the Wahhabis. Okay, remember one of the dead guys on the helicopter was bin Laden. That's another way of saying a Wahhabi fundamentalist Muslim. Okay, the leadership right now in Saudi is Sunni, and they can claim to be Muslim all they want, but I kind of doubt they follow the Muslim principles. Murdering civilians in Yemen and going to their Vegas strip club in the desert with lots of sick parties for royals only. And when they do the appropriations, I'm referring to the royals, appropriations where they just walk up to a successful business in Riyadh and say, we want to buy you for 10% of your value, and if you don't comply, we're going to throw your ass in prison. I don't think that's following the Quran either. So these princes are hardly practicing Muslims. They're more like criminals operating with U.S. military protection, buying a bunch of treasury bonds with the promise of buying a bunch of American-made weapons.
So you're telling me they didn't earn their money the honest way?
No, they stole their national treasure, and they're buying up London properties and foreign bank equity, and they're making their escape plans. Mm-hmm. That's what I think is going on right now. I just read an article yesterday that there is a large group of the out-of-power royals. Just think of the half-brothers who never ended up getting a piece of the big pie. They got their medium pieces of the pie. They didn't get the power. They didn't get the positions. They didn't have the stealing rights. And they're just scattering right now. They're taking their money and scattering because I think they sense a palace coup and civil war in Riyadh. Mm-hmm. So I come to this one point, Will, that's very important, and that is the Saudis have no friends in the Arab world. They have a partner in the Yemen war in United Arab Emirates. They have a partner that covers their bills in executing the war in Yemen, and who have designs on stealing the Yemen untapped oil and gas reserves on the same Arabian Peninsula, but not in Saudi Arabia. It's in Yemen, a very primitive country with almost zero exploration and production history of their energy deposits. The UAE has been involved in hiring Australian military officers as mercenaries to run the Yemen war by hiring grunt soldiers from Sudan. I call it cannon fodder. And the Saudi role is hardly soldiers either. It's Air Force. That's why one of their favorite activities is bombing market centers, schools, community buildings, residential areas, hospitals, and trying out some of their new nifty American-made weapons like phosphorus bombs that burn people alive. Okay, so the Saudis run the airstrikes. The UAE runs the ground operations through mercenaries. And the Saudis and UAE run take care of all the bills. And many of the bills are handled with narcotics money through the Bush family. I just cannot conceive how this is going to end well.
It's such a mess.
Then you got the Saudis bickering with Qatar and fighting over Muslim Brotherhood and shades of Muslim.
Yeah, no,
Muslim teachings and all kinds of interference culturally, interference with religious teachings, interference with how the Saudis want Egypt to turn out, interference in Lebanon.
Yeah, here's one right here, Jim. I'm scanning Zero Hedge. Here's an article. Hezbollah leader says Saudi Arabia has declared war on Lebanon and Hezbollah in a televised address against what he called miscalculations, and said Saudis are angry because their dreams did not come true in Syria, Lebanon.
It didn't come true. They could not get their way, and this is so ugly and difficult to understand, but the Syrians are a different type of Arab tribe and a different type of Muslim follower. So the Saudis wanted to place their own type in the position of power in Syria and obstruct all Iranian infiltration, either commercially or with the energy world, as in the pipeline, the Iranian gas pipeline. But go back to the point again. The Saudis have no friends. So when they conduct this purge inside Saudi, they're not going to be able to get much help outside Saudi to keep things firm inside Saudi. And I think they planted the seeds of a civil war with all the different groups in Saudi Arabia that don't like the strict social laws, that follow the Quran. They want a little bit more liberalization in their society. Okay, you got all that group. Then you got all the half-brothers who got cut out of the billions, and they're resentful that for a generation they haven't been rich and have not been able to buy a yacht on the Mediterranean. So they're resentful. And then you got this all-new resentment of Mohammed bin Zayed, who was the crown prince, who was the Langley favorite, and now is no longer the favorite, and got pushed out and probably still has Langley friends. So if I were to say, what does the next act of this tragedy play look like in my play guide, I would say it would be Prince Bandar's family and the Zayed family against the Salman family. And just to add a little bit of spice to the mix, the Yemenis are very angry about this disgusting war crime episode in Yemen executed by UAE and the Saudis. They enlisted help from the Iranian military. And they've got missiles, and they're starting now to fire on the Western targets in Saudi Arabia. Missiles.
Jesus.
They're firing on the
capital.
No, well, not yet. They're firing on oil fields that are not under Shiite control. Because the Shiites in Yemen are against the Sunnis of Saudi and UAE. This is a sectarian type of violent episode where the Sunnis want to capture the Yemeni energy deposits and hundreds of billions of wealth. Because why? The Saudi oil reserves are depleted and Aramco is grotesquely overvalued. The entire idea of floating an Aramco stock deal, to me, is confirmation that they're out of oil.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, here's something just out this morning, Zero Hedge, about setting the stage for war. U.S. Air Force says missile targeting Saudi capital was Iranian. Oh, yikes. No, it's heating up. It's heating up over there incredibly. Jim, you called for Saudi 2 years ago for unrest.
Yeah.
For
the fall of the House of Saud 2 years ago, I said it's going to be a consequence of the petrodollar. Everything's going to fall apart, and add to that the decline in the oil revenue.
And here we go.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Okay, now you're next going to have pressure. The Chinese are backing down a little bit, so I hear. The Chinese want to buy Saudi oil in RMB currency terms. Mm-hmm. And now, after stealing rival accounts of between 400 and 800 billion, MBS might not need the Chinese infusion of investment capital. Mm-hmm. But I think something funny is going to happen next. I think the Langley crew are going to make it very difficult for MBS to tap into that money source. They're going to block SWIFT movement from European banks, London banks. Who knows? I don't think it's going to be that easy. It's not like you got $800 billion sitting in these mid-sized Saudi banks. No, they're scattered all over the place. The money's got to come home. And I think they're going to be blocked by the angry Langley side who had their guy, Mohammed bin Zayed, pushed out. It's like you've got a clusterfuck going on here with seven sides.
So we can't even clearly identify right now who is not only shot down the helicopter, who's arresting these people, these princes, and then who is seizing the accounts? All these accounts, $800 billion in liquid assets has been frozen.
Well, I mean, you got to keep this a little bit simple. The Langley side is not going to arrest Prince Bandar. He's Bandar Bush. Okay? And those other power center guys like, oh gosh, let me get a name for you. The Saudi National Guard, Prince Miteb bin Abdullah. Okay, so former King Abdullah's son, National Guard head, he's dead. I don't think that was done by people who oppose the dollar. Mm-hmm. Okay, you've got two camps that want to preserve the dollar. It's the Pentagon white hats, who are willing to tolerate endless war, who just might want to cut out some of the narco element regarding terrorism and ISIS. What you've got here, what I'm leading to here, is not just a civil war in Saudi Arabia. What I'm leading to is a complete schism, a breakdown and battle between the Pentagon and Langley.
Wow, fascinating. A complete shit show.
You know, Will, this shit's getting real.
It's almost too many people. Like, I don't even know where to go. I was hoping this was some easy slam dunk swamp being drained story, but it's clearly not.
I don't think there's anything simple here. I think anything that you come up with and put on the table and say, well, here's something that's kind of simple and straightforward. No, I think it's got some hairy underbelly that hasn't been identified fully.
Well, just of these international underpinnings that you speak of, all this crazy stuff that's going on globally, you know, the heroin processing, the friggin' U.S. issuing, you know, money to process heroin to bring it back to our own streets. All this insanity that these people are doing, of course, this thing is deep. There are so many facets to their operations, to upholding the dollar or bringing it down. I mean, all these things, right? So clearly the wars have started. The battles are blazing. I'm just wondering what the hell's going to happen next.
What's next, I think, is some relative calm as the perpetrators think that they've succeeded. But they planted seeds. And like any seed, it needs a little time to germinate. And I think sometime around Christmas or a little afterwards, we're going to see some violent situations emerge in Saudi Arabia. But in the meantime, we might see some missiles coming from Yemen that hit not just Western oil installations, but hit some urban centers. Mm-hmm. That's going to, I think, just lift it to a new level. What I'm saying is that the Yemeni side is going to bring the war to Abu Dhabi and Riyadh. Mm-hmm. And I hear that, you know, Dubai is at risk too, but the princes live in UAE. The princes live primarily in Abu Dhabi. Think of Abu Dhabi as their Washington and Dubai is their New York. And that's not a perfect parallel, but it makes some sense. The residence of the leaders and the power center of UAE is Abu Dhabi. The location for commerce, banking, gold market, banking functions linking to London, etc., that's Dubai. Mm-hmm. And Dubai is not responsible for the Yemen war. The princes in Abu Dhabi are. So I think Abu Dhabi and Riyadh are going to be the targets. And I don't know how accurate the missiles can be from several hundred miles, but we're going to get some calm for a month or two. We need to see the fallout for having arrested Prince Bandar, because Bandar has friends in the Bush crime family. And they might pull some strings to release his frozen accounts. They might pull some strings to release him from house arrest or prison or wherever he is. They tend to be under house arrest because you don't shove them in with the general population of murderers and thieves in prison.
And pot smokers.
Yeah, well, they need a special diet and they need air conditioning, and you know how it is.
Yeah, right.
But, Will, this shit is getting real.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to be watching to see what happens with hints and indications about Chinese oil sales in RMB, because the Chinese have not backed out of some large multi-billion-dollar investments in Saudi Arabia to help MBS, the Crown Prince, for his pet project of Technology 2020. In other words, diversify the Saudi economy with multiple billions in investment beyond petrochemical. You know, like communications and pharmaceutical and satellites and medical, whatever,
mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
And I think that is going to go exactly nowhere. But he might try to finance it with the stolen money from his rivals.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think he's going to get very far stealing that money. There are going to be blocks, and watch how China helps out so that they don't get that money. It's going to be so weird. The cluster FARC is going to have so many sides. Very hard to figure this all out. Okay, but the conclusion I come up with is that Saudi Arabia is moving away from the U.S. dollar sphere. And that's inevitable. They've got an oil deal with Russian Rosneft. They've got all kinds of oil sales with China. And all you have recently is an opportunity to steal a few $100 billion. How far is that going to go? I don't know. I don't think it's going to be successful. I don't think it's going to solve their financing problem. This is so complicated. And a lot of other people are focusing on Lebanon. Mm-hmm. Where a Saudi puppet just resigned, I think, to get out of the way. And I don't know. I don't even want to discuss Lebanon except to say that's a whole other side that I didn't even touch.
Mm-hmm.
That's complicated and very gnarly and dangerous. I enjoy the fact that the Saudis have no friends. They don't earn any. They don't deserve any. They've been lousy Arab partners and friends. They've thrown their weight around. They've financed ISIS terrorism. They're involved in narcotics. And they're involved in numerous things that bother the hell out of all their Gulf Arab neighbors.
Well, and the Russians and the Chinese have got to be hip to this too. They certainly. This isn't a positive, right?
Yeah.
Even though they're still conducting certain facets of business and trade.
Well, I'm going to have to wrap this up. I've got something else I got to go to. I'm sorry.
No, man. Thank you for the time, and as always, it's been just a head spinner. Jim, tell us a little bit about I know that you work tirelessly on your monthly reports. Tell us a little bit about your work and where it can be found before we let you go.
Okay. It's been 13 and a half years now. It's been quite a run. And now we're starting to see a climax of successful, large-scale, global forecasts. Like the arrival of the gold trade note. I think it's going to come out of the Chinese gold for oil futures contract out of Shanghai. The contract is going to have a working trade payment vehicle, I think, called the gold trade note. I think it's just a matter of time before it takes shape. It's been one of my very big forecasts for the last 4 or 5 years. And recently, another major forecast looks like it's coming into being, and that is the beginning of the fall of the House of Saud and the civil war that tears the nation apart, victim of the fall of the petrodollar. So the website is www.goldenjackass.com. On it, you can find interviews and public articles. I might write a public article, for instance, about just listing all the factors of Saudi and how complicated this is and multifaceted the chaos will be. And that will be on the Golden Jackass public page. But the two major reports are the Global Money Report about high-level things and the Golden Currency Report that's at, I hate to say lower level, but, ground level items like gold demand and the formation of the Eurasian trade zone and how that's all happening. So there are two reports that cover the entire gold and dollar and banking situation from different angles. And it's a labor of love. I'm actually working right now on updating the forecast page, the list of correct forecasts. I'm getting a lot of compliments from clients saying, Jim, unbelievable. We're starting to see something you've been forecasting now for the last 2 years or more regarding breakdown in Saudi land. So I want to list these things, and I got to be honest, I'm having a little trouble accessing the forecast page. It's not that it's locked from access, it's locked from changing. And my web manager promised to overcome this. I'm going to give her a document that just lists all the forecasts, and she's going to put it in. But that should be done in the next month or so. I'm going to get that together. I hope people go to the website and sign up. I know there's a lot of distress out there, difficulties with the economy. One of the unfortunate downsides of correct forecasts like what I have is the economy in the United States is in just dreadful condition. I think we're in the 10th consecutive recession year. And this has never happened. But due to Reich economics, it's illegal to talk about a recession. Mm-hmm. And due to Reich economics, they distort the economic statistics to lead us to believe that unemployment's at 5% when it's actually about 23 or 4%. And the number of Americans out of work is rising every year. The number of Americans not even in the workforce.
What do you think the real CPI is, Jim? Just if you had to throw out a guesstimate. I know you and Kirby and gang have covered that. What is the real potential inflation rate? 10%?
I don't think it's 10 anymore because the oil price came down.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
I think it's probably stuck around 6 or 7%. Mm-hmm. It was 8, 9, 10% for consecutive years.
At $100 oil, that's where we were.
The Chapwood CPI came out with 50 urban centers of America, and they concluded that the inflation rate, CPI, in those cities was between 8 and 10% consistently for several years.
Per year. I mean, that is just friggin' astounding.
Unbelievable. I know.
It's really unreal. Hey,
so
buddy.
All of the claimed low inflation. Let me phrase that differently. If the real inflation is 6% and they claim it's 2%, they're calling that 4% economic growth. So then they come out and say we have 1.5% economic growth, subtract the 4, and you got 2.5% recession. That's the simple napkin math of how this recession is looking statistically. Mm-hmm. But I think we have a multi-year recession starting 1 year before Lehman. And now we got, before we had the mortgage-backed security, subprime bond explosion chaos, the MBS. Now we got a geopolitical MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. MBS in 2007 regarding mortgage bonds, and now MBS regarding a breakdown of Saudi Arabia, the most important nation as foundation for the petrodollar for 40 6 years.
That's a great analogy. I'm glad you made that tie-in, because I thought when you said MBS early on in the interview, I thought of the good old mortgage-backed security and the decimation that it did in the last bubble bursting. Buddy, go enjoy your afternoon. I know you got some pretty exciting plans and a beautiful day, and otherwise we'll just stay on the horn here all afternoon. But we appreciate you very much and your work. Please check out Jim's website and his reports. It's fantastic data, and he goes deeper into this stuff we've talked about and tries to make it more palpable. Sometimes you have to read these reports over and over again just to get your head around
sign
it.
up for the newsletter and find out what's going to happen in the next couple of years.
Yeah, even better, right?
Yeah.
Thanks again, buddy. We appreciate it.
Okay. Pleasure being on, and thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jim. Take care.